Hey there, students. I'm going to talk to you a little bit now about the Italian versus the Northern Renaissance. I'm going to screencast on this one because this is less of a content-oriented lecture and more of a tutorial. For those of you who don't know, I offer online tutoring on my website, and specifically, I'll be offering this year an 8-month writing clinic. You can click here for more information on that. And what we're going to look at in this sort of tutorial segment is comparison, which is one of the 4 thinking skills that could come up on your LEQ, your long essay question, if you are taking APUSH, AP Euro, or AP World. So what we're going to do is we're going to compare the Italian Renaissance and the Northern Renaissance. And in comparing, remember that we need to look at the differences and the similarities. Now, this is where a lot of people lose points on an essay because when they hear compare, they just think contrast, they think differences. So the first thing that's very important is that you are keeping in mind differences and similarities. Now, I've got similarities underlined here because a lot of times the differences are much easier to emphasize than the similarities, but we need to make sure that we do both. Now, first of all, there is the Italian Renaissance that is typically characterized as individualistic and secular. And then there's the Northern Renaissance that is characterized as more socially oriented and Christian in comparison to the Italian Renaissance. So when we're setting up our essay for our long essay question, what we have to do here, this is a pre-writing setup that I'm going to be recommending to my students this year and will be working on in the 8-month writing clinic. The Italian Renaissance will need something here, a contrasting characteristic or a few characteristics and supporting evidence. And then over here, we will need contrasting characteristics and supporting evidence for the Northern Renaissance. So for everything in the Italian Renaissance column, there needs to be a counterpoint in the Northern Renaissance column. And then, after we do that, we need to find something they have in common. It doesn't have to be great, but it needs to be something that comparison and contrasting needs to happen. So let's think about how we would do this and how we would create an argument comparing the Italian Renaissance and the Northern Renaissance. Now, what I'll do here is I'd like to start off with my evidence. So you need at least 2 pieces of evidence to get the first evidence point. And in order to do that, I think the best way to compare the Italian Renaissance and the Northern Renaissance would be to take Machiavelli's The Prince and put it up against Thomas More's Utopia. So we have one of the classic works of the Italian Renaissance and another of the Northern Renaissance. First of all, Machiavelli's The Prince is about how to be an effective leader. It is individualistic. It is about how to improve yourself as an individual who is seeking to acquire power. Whereas Thomas More is focusing more on the ideal society, and this goes along with the tendency of Northern Renaissance humanists to focus on social reform. Now, when you look at Machiavelli, it is better to be feared than loved. The end justifies the means. This is a secular approach. This is not Christian. You can't imagine the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are those who are feared, for they will get what they want. I would love to write a Sermon on the Mount according to Machiavelli. One of these days I might get to it. If you ever work on it and want to send it to me, if you get there first, let me know. Now, when you go to Thomas More's Utopia, you see the abolition of property, and then this idea that wealth corrupts people. Now, this is an idea that is very prominent in Christianity, and especially when you look at Catholic theology in particular, you'll see where, Catholic clergy take a vow of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Now, the extent to which they were keeping those vows during the Renaissance is up for debate, but Thomas More is writing from an obviously Catholic Christian perspective. So when you look at these 2 works, you can use them both as evidence to support the characterization of the Italian Renaissance as more secular and individualistic, and the characterization of the Northern Renaissance as more Christian and more socially oriented. So, you're really kind of throwing this all together, that the evidence is supporting a point. Now, what about for what they have in common? Well, you might think this would be difficult, but then again, it's very easy. Because when it comes down to it, both Machiavelli and Thomas More both the Italian humanist and the Northern humanist were inspired by classical studies, so they were driven by humanism. Now, if you want to be a little more specific and offer some evidence, you could say that Machiavelli was imitating ancient Rome. He was looking at ancient Rome for his inspiration to that. And then Thomas More was, of course, writing on the model of Plato. Plato's Republic explored the idea of the ideal state. Now, if you're going for the second evidence point, you want to introduce some more things, you could go into more authors. For the Italian Renaissance, you go into Pico, Della Mirandola, you go into Petrarch or Castiglione, whereas for the Northern Renaissance, you could bring in Erasmus. But what I'm really trying to do here is get you set up to write a basic essay. So if you like what you heard here, think about signing up for my 8-month writing clinic. You can click for more information, and that is going to be available all year. We've got different levels of access, so give that some thought, and I will be back soon, possibly with some more tutorial screencasts, and definitely with some more content lectures soon. It's always a pleasure.